I'm really happy to have such speaker like we have today, like Benoît Grossman from Idea Invest, which is one of the main venture capitalists in France. We have two, so I'm just trying to have my notes. Sorry. So just before you have met William. So William, I don't have your name. I'm sorry. Voilà. So William Baobin. So you have introduced yourself just before, so I don't do it again. And Boji, you are currently the Assistant Dean of Global Executive Education and Chief Representative for Europe at CGSB. So it's Shenzhen Graduate School of Business, a tough business school with more than 10,000 chairman and CEO level alumni. So you have worked just before for many companies like Monsanto, Cargill, Pfizer, Wrigley, Mars, during more than 20 years. So it's an incredible career. Just before, so Benoît Grossman from Idea Invest, you have started the NASA. If I remember, I have seen some picture of you a few days ago on Facebook. Incredible career too, because you have worked for many companies. You have developed some patents for Thomson CSF, I think, if I remember. Is it true? Okay, and Idea Invest is one of the main VC in France. So I'm really happy to have you today to discuss about startup and entrepreneurship in China, how European startups can develop their own activity there, and what are the key factors to succeed. So my first question, what are the false ideas that French entrepreneurs mainly, have about China and the Chinese market? Who want to answer? The false idea, the prejudice that French people can have about China. Who want to start?
Yeah, so I don't know actually that much about the French entrepreneurs. Most of that we do have, in the last year, we've invested in 3 French entrepreneurs who are launching in China. But actually, all 3 spent time in China, so they're pretty familiar with China. I think the biggest problem for international entrepreneurs that want to go into China is their experience generally tends to send them in the wrong direction. So if you have developed a gut instinct, you have experience. This is very, very valuable. It allows you to, sends you in the right direction. But when you go to a new environment, that gut instinct is actually not only not a positive, it can be a huge negative. So most companies that enter China, we advise them to throw out their product, focus on what their unfair advantage is in the China market, and then try and use data. We're very focused on measurement and data, which is basically the customers talking to you. We use that data to drive the approach into the market, as opposed to gut instinct, because that'll send people usually in the wrong direction.
Boji.
Yes, I think we actually, one of the introduction I think about me is we developed a China Start program that is bringing the French and European startups to China. So through our schools network and through our investment partner. Now what we have found for most of European and French entrepreneurs, when they choose to go to China or go to America or go to other country, they fear about the language. They fear about things like counterfeit for the intellectual property protection, things like that. This is often the barrier for them. And also they are running thin in their funding. So they usually don't want to use their own money to go to China because the market is huge, it's unfamiliar territory, so they usually would like Chinese investor to invest in that. So that's why we also develop a program to help them to raise the money in China. And also they like to have a partner in China. Not like multinational company, they have great experience, they have local staff. They don't have anyone, they don't know anyone in China. So they like to create a partnership, to find the first batch of the customer in order to feel comfortable that someone is already using my product or someone wanted to distribute my product. So these are usually the startups in Europe are looking for before they go to China.
Benoit, you're working with a lot of French entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
What are their strengths?
Oh, so we do invest only like in entrepreneur based in Europe, and as a European entrepreneur, approximately 40 to 50% are French entrepreneur. So I'm just going to repeat to say some basic things about French entrepreneurs, saying that the French are good because there are some good engineering school. They're not too good at marketing, which is the opposite of American people. They are very optimistic. They are very energetic, and they are now, especially with the young generation, they are ready to go either to the east or to the west. I mean, a few years ago, within ID Invest, when we did invest in a European-born company, at the time we helped the company to relocate in the US to do business in the US. Now it's not the case anymore. So of course, but we are definitely now helping our entrepreneur to go to China. We just opened an office recently, like in Shanghai, and our office is just to help our entrepreneur to do local business. And what's important, like in every country, when you do enter in a new country, is to rely on a reliable partner. If you don't have any partner, especially in China, you're in bad shape, very bad shape. So we help entrepreneur to strike some deal and to have some good partnership.
So for earlier stage startups, we actually advise companies not to partner before they come into China. For later stage companies, it can be very, very important. But for early stage companies, if you do a JV or a partnership, we don't have actually too many success cases. I haven't found any success cases on the early stage. Later stage, once you're a little bit bigger, it definitely makes sense. But on the early stage side, it's quite difficult. So what we try and advise is that you come in yourself, you spend as little money as possible, you figure out whether you have an unfair advantage or an advantage in the China market, and then once you have a lay of the land, once you understand where the market, then you partner, or then you do the JV.
What are the differences between European entrepreneur and the Chinese entrepreneur?
I can start with, we see so many different entrepreneurs, so Europe cannot be generalized. For instance, we see even in the Northern Europe, it's quite different. And for instance, in the Nordic country, most of them doesn't have an incubator or accelerator. They're pretty much doing everything in their garage, in their home. They don't even have garage in their bedroom, basically. But the difference that I would see that the entrepreneurs in Europe are more focused on quality, technology, and they're more long-term oriented than the Chinese entrepreneur. Chinese entrepreneur has no patience. They really want to make it and make it fast. And also in terms of market space, the Chinese entrepreneurs are always talking about big market and big money. And here the entrepreneurs are usually more satisfied with a relatively smaller domestic market to start with?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Access to capital here has traditionally been it's been difficult in Europe, whereas in China, access to capital is not the problem. The problem is massive, intense and brutal competition. So most VCs, they focus on consumer. They said, don't talk to us unless you have 20 million users. And the idea is to grow fast as quickly as possible before the larger players like Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent crush you. So you have to go big very, very fast or else you die.
From your point of view, what are the best business opportunities for European startup?
I'll go really quickly. So we're a VC fund. We invest very little capital, usually about $100,000 to $200,000. And then we have a 3-month program where we help international companies come into China. We're actually also helping Chinese companies come out. It has its own set of challenges. But it comes down to I keep on saying unfair advantage. China's not a very fair place. It's pretty brutal. So if you don't have an unfair advantage, you don't belong in China. So maybe 95+% of the European startups should not come to China. It generally does not make any sense for them to go there. They're going to have less capital. They don't understand the local market. So where do international companies have an advantage? One is education. So Chinese people generally believe that their own education system is poor, and they're willing to trust international education platforms and products. Machine learning. For whatever reason, most of the Chinese mathematicians left the country and never came back. So we spend a lot of time trying to get Chinese mathematicians to come back to China. They're not particularly well respected in China. We do cross-border commerce. Like one of our companies launched about 5 or 6 weeks ago, and we're successfully selling an Hermes Birkin bag a week over WeChat. So it's a little weird, but people are buying, $10,000, $15,000 handbags over a chat program. But we've successfully done that. And then the final area is fintech. China is leading in P2P, but other trading systems and other areas, international folks have potentially a experiential advantage.
But you want to complete?
Yes, we see so many different countries. For instance, I was in Israel recently. We see that clearly Chinese commercial partners would like to see more startups in China in the technology areas. So France and Europe are generally considered to be country produce durable, high quality, fashionable product and with great technologies. So this is the area I think you got lots of advantages over Chinese startups. You give example, we went to Israel. Israeli companies, startup can go to China a lot, and Chinese love them because they're the startup nation and they have great technology development there, and they specialize in technology development rather than in the commercialization. So I see French and also European companies has great advantage to that. Like AI, for instance, is a great example. And also in the area, if I were to generalize this, basically in the area where the French product or technology go to China, that doesn't need to require a lot of local adaptation, that your technology can be just widely used. And blockchain, for instance, all those technologies, Chinese love it, and they wanted to have them more.
Benoit, for what reason do you go in China? Why do you create an office there?
So only reason we don't want to invest locally in China. We just invest in a European-born company, and we just want to help a company to expand. And as I was saying before, a few years ago when we wanted to help a company, we went to the West, went to the US, Silicon Valley especially. And now we realized like a few years ago that a lot of things was happening in the East, in China. So we decided just to open a local office just to help a company just to do business over there. We started like a few years ago. So we struck some deal with a big corporation. And our idea is just to help a company to expand in China. So we don't want to invest in China because we don't have any expertise. Invest in China is just requires some skills that I don't have as of today. And we don't want to hire a bunch of local investors. We just want to help our company to expand there. And for a few companies, we did have some concrete achievement. One of a company will be sold. It will be announced soon, but will be sold to a Chinese company. So we are very proud. This is a kind of introduction that was made through ID Invest, our local office in Shanghai. So this is also kind of stuff that we want to do, and for me, it's a kind of value added that we can bring to our startup company, to entrepreneurs.
Yeah, of course.
I think you're very right by saying that, because China doesn't need money. I mean, William just mentioned that we do have a lot of capital there. So, but you see lots of movement for the startups and go to China. It's just exactly the reason, because the market here is relatively segmented and small. And they used to go to America. It's a quite understandable market. But now they start to see China could be a very interesting and attractive option. Because first of all, not every startup wanted to go to America. They don't go to China. So still, it's early stage for the European startups to go to China. So you're doing a very pioneer job to really bring them to China. So this is precisely why we're doing this as well in the China Start program, to really help them to connect to those people, to have the capital and then to have the connections and the commercial partners where they can become their partners, like banks and like, you know, those organizations.
What are the main recommendations that you can do for to a young entrepreneur who wants to go to China? The main one, the three, if you want to.
Usually I just say don't come. But I'll put it just to put it into I'll put it into context. There is not a single example really of an international internet company that's successful in China. Uber fought to a draw. They spent $2 billion US, and you know, they got some value out of it, but they got, you know, acquired by Didi Dache, and then they shut down the service. So it's pretty rough.
Well, I come from the educational institution, so we still have the hope. So I'm not as pessimistic. Otherwise, we lose the value of being an institution to teach the startups. We believe there's still opportunity. We have a large network, as you mentioned. We have more than 10,000 chairman CEOs, including the founder and chairman of the Qihu 360, was one of our students. So we feel that there is a fair game that startups globally can play in China by going there. The problem is they're not properly trained. For its business model, you know, William was mentioning that, okay, don't find a partner at the beginning. But since it's not as simple as that, you know, there are many, many different models that we can teach startups how to deploy, you know. So sometimes knowledge is of great value. That how you know, that's why our students pay us lots of money to come to us, and then they become so widely successful, and they feel it's worth it. So this is what we're trying to do to help those startups to really gain that knowledge and to really know how to do it in China. We wanted to see the change here. We don't want China to be labeled as a nation that we reject the startups from the other country. This is not what we try to do.
Benoit, I think you agree with Boji and not with William.
Yes, I mean you have to be. Yeah, you have. So I will cast vote. You have to be very careful, and you have to rely on local partner. I mean, it's like in the life. I mean, if you go to a new country, I mean, you have to be with people that you trust. And that's just basic stuff. So.
William, okay, eBay
Yes.
failed, Uber failed in China, but I'm sure you can find a company. No, none. Really? Allez, we have Fred and Farid agency. We have.
I would not say Uber failed in China. I mean, financially they're okay. You know, you see Coca-Cola come to China. They bought the very well-known Chinese cocoa company. The reason is that they want to shut them down. Same is Didi. In this industry, the taxi hauling industry, they don't require two players. They just need one. So if you have two or three, then everybody is going to have a difficult time. The consumers see that you're all the same. So you got to give me a deal, otherwise I'm not going to use it. So this is a different industry, I have to say. It's a different industry, so we cannot use this as an example. But in other industries like blockchain, you know, internet security, or even digital marketing, you can have many players there. No problem for that.
Well, actually, I said Uber fought to a draw is a good thing. Yeah. So they did the best out of all the players. But, you know, Google out, Amazon's failure. Yeah, so it's tough.
Is there any question from the audience?
So don't get me wrong here. I actually specialize in investing in companies and taking them into China. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Even with our help, it's quite difficult.
With your help is better.
Yeah. So we've had some success, but yeah.
Your question?
Yes, I have one question. Do you recommend foreign entrepreneur to launch a startup directly in China instead of launching in their own country and then go to China?
Okay, so we focus on mobile first, mobile only. So in China, we've got about 700 million internet users. They generally, the first time they use the internet, it's on their phone. Okay, and most of the rest of the world is also like this: Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, South America, and Africa. So if you build a product in Western Europe, it's going to be pretty unsuited I'm internet only, okay, internet software. It's going to be unsuited to China. But if you're going to go after mobile first, mobile only, it makes sense to start in China or start in another mobile only market. Because the user requirement, the user experience is quite different. And China has a lot more in common than, say, Indonesia and Malaysia than France and Indonesia. It kind of depends on what your goals are and which markets you want to go into.
So you believe that a foreign entrepreneur can succeed in China as much as a Chinese or as much as a French entrepreneur in the US?
I can't speak to the US. I think probably French entrepreneurs have a better time in the US than in China because their gut instinct is based on a developed market, and the US is another developed market, whereas a mobile first, mobile only market is kind of alien. Your gut instincts are going to be all wrong in China, just like they're going to be all wrong in Indonesia.
My answer might be slightly different. I actually think that it's actually better you go to China to start up rather than you do it here. The reason being that there's a rich capital. When you are there from France or from Europe, you go there that people already love you. Somehow it's a little bit discrimination against startups in China, and they give you a little bit a favor for that. So you can maybe easily get the funding, seed money. Second is that you don't need to deal with all those like market, planning here. And we have company we brought to China, and they started in UK, and after they started for a few years, they decided to enter China. And once they get to China, within 7 months, they established 200 retail selling points in China within 7 months. So they were like, forget about UK business. Let's focus on China. So for them, they will tell you, direct to your eyes, that don't waste your time here. Go to China, and to start with. So that's my answer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
But Benoit, if I remember, you have the experience with Mythic, with Marc Simoncini, who, if I remember, he has bought a company in China to try to develop Mythic.
Yes.
It was the same with Viadeo.
Yes.
The two failed.
Yes.
What are the reasons?
Complete failure.
Complete failure, yeah. I don't give the amount. Lot of dollars.
Let me. So yeah, for these two companies, so Mythic, it was like a French company based in doing some dating services, and Viadeo is online professional services. So both of these companies bought some Chinese company and trying to expand in this country. Mythic was back 10 years ago in 2005, and Viadeo maybe like 5 years ago, and both of them failed. And just because maybe we didn't have the local partner or we didn't have the right people to manage the local company in China. And
if I remember, Marc Simoncini was saying about this, that when he come back to France from China, he didn't know what he have bought in China.
Same with me.
Is it true?
Yeah, but once again, it's very complicated. When you do enter like a new market, first, I mean, the language is different. I mean, everything is different. The way to do business is different. So, once again, if you don't have the local people that you can trust, you're in bad shape. And this is what happened with Viadeo and Mythic. I mean, if you don't have the local partner, I mean, you don't understand anything. You have to trust the people. When you buy a company, as Marc Simoncini was saying, when he came back from China, he did not know what he bought because he didn't have any trust in the guy who was a manager locally. So that's it. So,
William.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, people is one of the #1 problems in China. Not like the people, but hiring good people. There's a general rule of thumb that the best of the best become entrepreneurs. And then the sort of the second tier who can still execute but not good enough to become an entrepreneur, they work for the entrepreneurs. And then the tier 3 worst people work for multinationals. And so it's no longer in style. And so most people have a difficult time hiring. And also the other problem is that many international companies And Chinese companies have the same problem when they go overseas. They try and micromanage, or they try and put in systems and processes and reporting, and that just slows everybody down. I don't think people talk about it too much anymore, but you have normal working hours of 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week, and that's sort of normal. But for international companies, you get a month off of vacation. So if you're working a third of the hours, sometimes it's a little harder to compete.
Okay, so you recommend to watch the movie about Alibaba?
Depends on which one.
The first one, the first documentary. We have watched it.
Crocodile?
Yes, Crocodile.
Okay, yeah, I mean, he's scrappy. Jack Ma failed over and over and over and over again, but he didn't give up. I mean, I worked for 2.5 years on their IPO. They were this close to going out of business. They fired, thousands, the entire U.S. and international team except for one person in one day. And they almost died, but the guy never gives up. Jack does not give up.
What is the geography of startups in China?
Most of the startups in China on the East Coast, I have to say. And Shenzhen are widely considered to be the Silicon Valley of China. But before, it was Beijing. In Beijing, there is Zhongguancun, which is near the Tsinghua and Beijing University. And they have basically they were called Silicon Valley of China before. But now Shenzhen is really overtaking it, particularly in the Huaqiangbei areas. They have developed such a core competencies of the hardware, of the artificial intelligence, et cetera, et cetera. So we see that entrepreneurship, unfortunately, Shanghai has often been considered behind. But you're an exception, okay? So Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, all those coastal lines are considered to be, the concentration of the most of the entrepreneurs and startups.
Where are you based, Benoit?
Our local offices is based in Shanghai.
Okay. You want to complete?
Oh, sorry. No, I mean, the usual rule of thumb is for local China internet, it's Beijing. Shanghai cross-border, and to some extent media. There's a big travel company there called C-Trip. And then Shenzhen for hardware. We founded the first hardware accelerator in the world called HAX. According to TechCrunch, we're the #1 investor in hardware and the #1 in crowdfunding. And that the accelerator, one of our 2 accelerators, is based in Shenzhen. And that ecosystem there for hardware is unbeatable. You've got the manufacturing, the component suppliers, the molds, the QA, the logistics, all in one place. And it doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. So it's amazing.
Can you tell us a bit more about your accelerator, how it works? What is it different from the accelerators in the US, in Europe?
So we're SOSV. We run 8 accelerators across 4 verticals. So we're #1 in biotech in the world, #1 in hardware, #1 in food, and then I run internet. So we're not #1 in internet. We're global by sector. So we go very, very deep by sector. And we try and limit the number of companies in the batch. It's a 3-month program. We invest before the program. We help them scale and grow. And each of our accelerators has a purpose. So for China Accelerator, our purpose is helping companies come into China. For my mobile accelerator, we help companies from around the world go into Southeast Asia, Eastern and Europe, and South America on our 130 million smartphone platform that we control. For HAX, we go from prototype to delivery in 3 to 5 months. So we took 83 companies to CES this year, 10 best of show. We help them with the Kickstarter. And then we have another program called HAX Growth in San Francisco that helps them go into channel. So we have strategic partnerships with all the retailers. For biotech, it's capital, and we have 2 $5 million labs. So that's the help that we give. And food is an experiment. And then we are a VC fund, so we do invest after the program as well.
Okay, for the reverse, what do you recommend to a Chinese startup which want to come in Europe?
Okay, so don't make the same mistakes as the Americans and I guess the Europeans do when they go to China. So most Chinese actually can't give up control either. They're trying to remote control their international offices from China. They don't understand the market. So one of the most successful companies in China is Tencent. We talked a lot about WeChat. So WeChat 3 years ago, they were spending 120,000 US dollars a day marketing WeChat outside of China. They got 100 million users. Now they have 70 million. Okay, so it took them 3 years to lose 30% of their user base. Why? They don't give any control over the international product to players on the ground who understand the US user, understand the Western European user. So they also have a control complex.
Yeah, I think my first advice for the Chinese startups is we don't see many Chinese companies, and Tencent is not just startup anymore. So, but for the most of Chinese startups, they're not ready to go to US or go to Europe. Partly because the domestic market is big enough for them, and secondly is they really have no clue how to do it, how to go to Europe. They, like William was saying, that we see so many cases, they go to Europe or go to America, they are still using old management style. And they don't understand the cultural differences. They're not quite educated, I must say that. They're very busy and using their Chinese approach to manage their business in China at this point. So I don't think it's the moment yet for them to come to Europe. But I must say that maybe in 10 years' time, they will be ready. And if they do, the Europe should be very fearful about it. Because when they do that, it's going to create major disruptions to European business and to American business as well. So that's why I always tell people that when China copy Europe, you should celebrate. When they start to innovate, you should be fearful, because then they're going to come to you and rob you. And right now, they copy you, just don't make it such a big deal. Go there, do your thing, because they're doing marketing for you by copying your product. But when they really innovate, come to Europe, then you should really fear about it. Because there are going to be not just one, there are going to be in each category, there are going to be lots of people come here, and that would be a nightmare.
Benoit, how do you see the competition with Chinese startup?
With Chinese startup, you mean locally over there or here?
Yeah, Chinese startup all around the world when they they want to.
They are going extremely fast. I'm just going once again to say some basic things. They are doing extremely fast. So they are a real competitor. But most of the time, I mean, market, especially like in the internet, is locally based. I mean, there is some Chinese internet, European internet. So we do not necessarily compete face to face with Chinese company, but the competition is quite fierce and quite important. And Chinese entrepreneurs are very quite strong.
Okay, last question.
Just, I mean, if you. China's traditionally had difficulty in Western Europe and the US, so instead they've gone into the emerging markets. So on mobile internet, if you look at Russia, if you look at Brazil, you look at Indonesia, you look at Southeast Asia, you have Facebook, you have Google, and then you have 6 Chinese companies, and they dominate the internet. Chinese companies are systematically destroying local competition in all these markets. They're pricing like cell phones at negative gross margin, and they're driving the local players out of business. So a year ago, local Chinese, Indian cell phone brands had 50% market share. Today they have 20% market share, whereas the Chinese have gone from like 16% to 46%. So it's a matter, it's a lot, they're coming out very successfully, but just not here.
How do you see the perspective in the 5 years for the European startup who want to go to China and on the other side? It will not have changed.
This is a very good question, right? So right now we're still begging people to go to China, okay? In 5 years, I will see that they will beg an opportunity to go to China, So I always encourage startups in Europe that, take your courage, go there, okay? And do your thing. It's just like you start up anywhere. Don't think of the hurdle, difficulty. Startup should be able to handle all those issues. And all this issue can be addressed. But what you should look at is not the challenge. If you look at the challenge or difficulty, you're not going to leave. There's so many challenges, so many possibilities. But startups should really think about the opportunity. What is the market? Are there enough market for your business? If they are, find a way to solve the problem and to deal with the challenge, language, whatever it is. Now, I see the people, startup, went to China, after 10 years doesn't speak Chinese. They're doing just fine. So language is absolutely not an issue. Cultural side, many foreigners figure out very quickly. There are 40,000 French people living in Shanghai. And more, every time I go to China, there's lots of French. You know, of course, I fly from Charles de Gaulle. But, you know, people went there, never regretted for it. And it's those people who didn't go there later on see that, gosh, I wish I was there 5 years ago.
Benoit?
I guess you said everything.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's very nice, but we call them the French mafia. So 20%, 10 to 20% of our investments are in French entrepreneurs in China. We're in Shanghai, strong network.
Okay. Last question.
I just wanted to reinforce from my experience and all the foreign entrepreneurs I'm seeing, at least in Beijing and part in Shanghai, they're all people that moved to China and they unlearned what they had learned before, kept the expertise that they had that was relevant, and then built from scratch. And a lot of them are successful by doing that instead of trying to transplant their startup from Europe or from the US into China, because there's a problem of unlearning what they had learned and building the startup from the start. But the other thing, and maybe William, you could address this, one thing that hasn't been explained about the Chinese partner. And of course, initially when I went to China, everybody said, you need a partner, you need a partner. And I quickly figured out, no, one, if I can't do it, if I can't figure it out, I cannot do a business where I'm relying on a partner too heavily. But more importantly is the issue of trust. And can you trust a partner? And I know so many stories of people that have gone and that have had their business basically taken away from them by the partner. And maybe, William, you probably have a lot more examples of that, of the pitfalls of the partner.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, there's cultural issues, there's vision issues, there's also ownership issues, because the foreign partner or the foreign entrepreneur holds offshore shares, and the local entrepreneur, co-founder, holds the onshore. So it's an unequal partnership, and the local partner can walk away with the business anytime they want to, which creates a small problem for the foreign entrepreneur. One of the reasons why we do not suggest partnering, especially in the early stage, figure it out yourself. There are success cases. There's Chunar, went public on the NASDAQ. They sold out for $6 billion. 2 of the 3 co-founders are foreigners. The CEO actually didn't speak Chinese until only the very end. So a $6 billion US exit, not that bad. So it can be done. They were very, very, very data focused. And the 3rd co-founder was local, and well, I won't go into that, but is local. He's now out of the company. He's got his own fund. But they had a lot of tension, and it was very, very, very difficult. So you can do it without speaking Chinese. You can do it without a local partner. But I do advise in the later stages to not find a partner, but to partner. To partner with to ally once you're on a more equal footing.
Okay, it's the end of this session. We can applause our speaker.